My name is Ethan Vale. And for the past 10 years, I've lived on the edge of nowhere, in a cabin where the mountains kiss the fog, where the wind sings only to those patient enough to listen. I wasn't always a hermit. Once I was a soldier, one of the best, they said. Then the war ended, and so did I. I left everything behind, the medals, the orders, the blood, and disappeared into silence. Now they call me Healer Vale. A quiet man who tends to wounds, sets bones, and brews bitter medicine for the weary travelers who pass through the valley. To them, I'm just another village doctor with scarred hands and a gentle voice. They don't see the calluses that come from holding a blade. They don't see the precision in my movements or the ghosts I carry in my chest. It was early autumn when she arrived. A soft knock on the cabin door broke the usual rhythm of rain against the roof. "Come in," I said. The door creaked open, and a young woman stepped in, soaked, shivering, clutching her side. She was bleeding, not fatally, but deep enough to leave a trail. "I heard you can heal," she managed between breaths. I motioned to the chair. "Sit." As I worked, cleaning the wound, stitching it with quiet care, I caught her stealing glances at me. There was something in her eyes, not just pain, but recognition. The kind you see when someone's seen too much. "You've done this before," she said softly. Her tone wasn't a question. I didn't look up, once or twice. "You're not just a healer, are you?" I smiled faintly. "Does it matter?" When I was done, she exhaled in relief. "You saved my life," she whispered. I tied the last knot. "No," I said gently. "You saved your own, you made it here." She laughed weakly. "You talk like an old monk." Maybe I am. Her name was Arya. She was traveling alone, or so she claimed. Before I could ask more, she fell asleep by the hearth, exhaustion taking her like a tide. I covered her with a blanket, then stepped outside. The forest breathed around me, the cicadas humming in the distance, the smell of wet pine and smoke filling the air. 10 years of solitude, and yet moments like this, still stirred something deep inside. A reminder that peace was fragile, that no matter how far you ran from your past, it always found a way to whisper your name. That night, I dreamed of fire, of a battlefield under a crimson sky, of blades flashing like lightning and a name shouted through smoke, "Ethan, behind you." When I woke, the cabin was silent again. But my hand was on the old dagger under my bed, the one I swore I'd never touch again. The next morning, Arya was gone. Only a note remained on the table, written in hurried script. "Thank you, they're still after me, don't get involved." But she'd forgotten one thing, a pendant, made of silver and ashwood. A pendant I recognized instantly. It bore the emblem of the Nightblades, the assassin order that destroyed everything I once stood for. My hand tightened around it. The scent of iron returned. And beneath the calm surface of my years of healing, something old and dangerous began to awaken. That night, as the wind howled through the trees, I lit a lantern and looked at my reflection in the dusty mirror. 10 years of isolation, 10 years of restraint, 10 years of pretending to be ordinary. I whispered to the man staring back at me. "You've healed enough, Ethan. Maybe it's time to protect again." Outside, the golden light of dawn crept through the fog. The forest stirred, alive and waiting. And for the first time in a decade, I felt the pulse of purpose again. 3 days passed since Arya vanished into the fog. 3 days of quiet, broken only by the drip of rain from the eaves and the crackle of the fire. Yet even in that silence, I could feel it. The shift in the air. The weight of eyes watching from the tree line. You don't spend a decade surviving battlefields without learning when the world is holding its breath. I was chopping herbs when the wind changed. A faint metallic scent brushed past, oil and steel. Someone was here. I set the knife down and spoke, voice calm but clear. "You can come out, no use hiding. The forest doesn't belong to you." For a moment, nothing moved. Then a figure stepped from the shadows, tall, lean, wrapped in black. A mask hid most of his face, but I didn't need to see his eyes to know what he was. "Ethan Vale," he said. His voice was smooth, too controlled. "Or should I call you Captain Vale?" I exhaled slowly. "That name's buried." "Then I'm here to dig it up." He moved like smoke, too fast for an ordinary man. But I wasn't ordinary either. His blade came first, a flash of silver aimed for my throat. I sidestepped, caught his wrist, twisted. The sound of tendons straining filled the air. He countered, kicking low. I parried with the wooden table leg, splintering it on impact. 10 years of quiet hadn't dulled me. It had sharpened me. Isolation has a way of distilling skill into instinct. He staggered back, panting. "You shouldn't be this fast." "I told you," I said, steadying my breath. "I'm just a healer." The fight ended not with a kill, but a mercy. I struck him once, precisely, cleanly, sending him to the ground unconscious. When he came to, he was bound by his own cord. I poured him water. He stared, confused. "You're not going to kill me." "Why would I?" I replied. "You're just another messenger." He flinched. She told us to find the girl, the one who betrayed the Nightblades." "Arya." He nodded, lips trembling. "She stole something from the Grandmaster." I waited. "What?" He hesitated. "A list, names of the ones who were marked for death, including yours." For a heartbeat, the world tilted. So the past wasn't done with me after all. When the assassin left, alive but shaken, I watched him vanish into the mist. Part of me hoped he'd tell the truth, that I was no threat. The other part knew better. They would come again. Stronger. Hungrier. I cleaned the blood from my hands and stared at the mountains. 10 years of healing, undone in one night. And yet, there was no bitterness. Only resolve. A quiet understanding that maybe this confrontation, was the purpose I had been waiting for. As I packed a small satchel, bandages, tinctures, a hidden dagger, a knock echoed at the door. Gentle, hesitant. I opened it to find her there, Arya, drenched, breathless, eyes wide with fear and guilt. "They found you," she whispered. "I know," I said softly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drag you into this." "You didn't," I interrupted. "You just reminded me of who I was." She looked at me then, really looked. Not as a stranger, but as someone who saw through the calm exterior into the storm underneath. "Then what are you going to do?" I met her gaze, steady and certain. "I'm going to heal the world one last time, even if it means breaking a few monsters along the way." Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. And for the first time in years, I stepped beyond the cabin door, not as a healer, not as a recluse, but as the man I used to be. Not a killer. Not a hero. Something in between. A quiet storm walking toward the ghosts of his past. The road from my cabin wound down through the valley like a scar, carved by time and rain. For years, I'd watched travelers cross it from afar. Merchants, wanderers, sometimes fugitives. Now, it was my turn to walk it again. The air smelled of wet pine and cold iron, and beside me, Arya kept pace, silent but alert. We didn't speak much. Some silences are too full for words. By dusk, we reached the old stone bridge that divided the wildlands from the town of Arwen. It wasn't much, just cobbled streets, flickering lanterns, and a tired inn that smelled of smoke and cinnamon. But after 10 years in the wilderness, it felt like another world. Inside, a few locals turned their heads when I entered. They saw the cloak, the scars, the quiet way I moved. I saw their curiosity and their caution. Small towns always recognize danger, even when it's disguised as calm. The innkeeper, a broad-shouldered woman with kind eyes, smiled politely. "Haven't seen you before, stranger." "Passing through," I said, setting a few coins on the counter. 2 rooms." Arya nudged me. "One's enough, safer." Her tone was casual, but her eyes darted to the window, scanning shadows. I nodded. 1 room, then. We ate in silence. I watched her hands tremble as she lifted her spoon. When you've been hunted, even a warm meal feels foreign. Finally, she spoke. The Nightblades, they weren't always killers. I looked up. Go on. They started as protectors, an order sworn to balance power in the Empire. But after the Grandmaster died, someone took control. Someone called Raven. He turned them into something else. An army of assassins, I said quietly. She nodded, and I was one of them. The words hung between us. I didn't react, didn't flinch, just listened. I was trained to eliminate targets marked as corrupt, but the list I found, it was different. Innocent people, scientists, teachers, even soldiers. Her voice cracked. You were on it too, Ethan. The only one marked priority kill. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. Why? She hesitated. Because you survived something you weren't supposed to. I frowned. The ambush 10 years ago. Yes, you were meant to die there. Raven made sure of it. I remembered the night clearly now. The fire, the betrayal, the blade that should have ended me but didn't. And the shadowed figure who walked away before the smoke cleared. Raven. The man who took everything and left me with a scar that refused to fade. Before I could speak, the door burst open. A gust of wind extinguished half the candles, and 3 men entered, hooded, armed, silent. Their movements were too clean for bandits. Nightblades. Ethan Vale, the leader said, his voice flat. Come quietly. I rose slowly. You always send 3 for a healer. He smirked. We heard you were rusty. Behind me, Arya's hand brushed her dagger. Don't, I whispered. You're still hurt. She gritted her teeth. Then what? I moved. A flicker, a blur, 10 years of control unraveling in a single heartbeat. The first assassin went down before his blade left its sheath. The second swung high. I caught his arm, twisted, and sent him crashing into the table. The third managed to cut my sleeve before I disarmed him with a short, sharp strike. Silence. The innkeeper stood frozen behind the counter. The other patrons stared, wide-eyed. To them, I was no longer just a healer. I was something far older, far quieter, and far more dangerous. When it was over, I looked at the 3 unconscious men and sighed. Bury your pride, I murmured. Live better than your master. Arya stared at me, stunned. You fought like someone who remembers, I said. She reached out, hesitated, then touched my arm. You could have killed them. I could have, I agreed softly, but I've spent 10 years trying to save lives. That doesn't stop now. We left the inn under a pale moon, our breath misting in the cold air. The night stretched wide and endless, stars scattered like promises above. Where do we go now? She asked. I glanced back at the dark horizon. Home, I said, to where it started. The capital. I nodded. If Raven wants me dead, he can say it to my face. Arya smiled faintly. You really are insane. Maybe, I said, but I'm done hiding. As we walked, the forest opened before us, bathed in silver light. The wind carried the scent of pine, and the distant echo of something like hope. Arya fell into step beside me. For a brief, fragile moment, it felt less like running and more like returning. And somewhere deep inside, beneath scars and silence, something began to heal. The city of Lyrian wasn't what I remembered. Tall spires clawed at the sky, smog curling like smoke from a fire that refused to die. Crowds pressed against cobblestones, oblivious to the shadows slipping through alleys and over rooftops. It smelled of iron, oil, and desperation. And it felt like the perfect place for ghosts to hide. I hadn't been here in 10 years. Back then, I'd fought for honor, for comrades, for survival. Now I returned as something quieter, sharper, and far more dangerous. Arya walked beside me, silent, her hand brushing the pendant around her neck, the one that had started this chain of events. You're calm, she said softly. I expected more panic. I didn't look at her. Panic won't save anyone, precision will. We found a small inn on the edge of the merchant district, and I rented a room under the name of a long-forgotten cousin. Once inside, I unpacked the essentials: bandages, herbs, knives, and my old, trusted dagger. Every scar on my body itched with memory, the muscle memory of fights, escapes, and death narrowly avoided. Arya finally broke the silence. "Why didn't you leave when they marked you?" I stared out the window at the smog-lit city. "Because someone has to face them, someone has to end it, and I can't pretend to be just a healer forever." Her gaze softened. "Even after everything, you forgive so easily." I let out a quiet laugh. Not forgiving, choosing to survive differently. The first encounter came at night. I sensed him before I saw him, the calm, suffocating presence of Raven. He stepped from the shadows, black cloak flowing like oil, face half hidden beneath a hood. "Ethan Vale," he said, voice like cold glass. 10 years, that's a long time to hide." I stepped forward, keeping my stance low, relaxed. "I didn't hide, I healed." He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "And yet, you're here. You always were too curious, too capable, the perfect threat." "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Why mark me for death?" "Because you saw too much, survived too much. You remembered what others forgot." The air around us thickened. Taut as a bowstring. I didn't flinch. "You trained alone," Raven said, circling. 10 years, and now you think you can stop me." I let my fingers brush the dagger at my side. "I don't think, I know." We clashed beneath the moonlight. Raven was fast, almost inhuman, but solitude and discipline had honed me into something sharper than any sword he wielded. He struck like a storm, heavy and sudden, but I moved like water, precise, anticipating every shift. Every strike I parried reminded me of the years I'd spent perfecting motion, strength, and restraint. Finally, I disarmed him, holding my dagger to his throat. "I warned you," I said softly. "I'm done running and I'm done hiding." Raven's hood fell back, revealing the man who had haunted my nightmares for a decade. For a moment, there was no threat, only recognition. "You survived," he whispered, almost in awe. "Yes," I said, "and I healed along the way, not just others, myself." He nodded slowly. "Perhaps you've become something more than I imagined." The fight ended not with death, but with understanding. Raven slumped, breathing heavily, defeated in more ways than one. "I underestimated you," he said. 10 years of quiet, you've become unstoppable." I helped him to his feet. "We all have a choice. You can change." He didn't answer. He only vanished into the shadows, leaving the city quiet again. I turned to Arya, who had watched silently. "You see now?" I asked. She nodded. "You didn't just survive, you became someone extraordinary." I smiled faintly. Extraordinary, maybe, but still human, still healing. And for the first time in a decade, I allowed myself to breathe. To feel the warmth of someone beside me, not a comrade, not a student, but something more subtle, something soft. The city lights flickered, and for a moment the chaos felt distant. We were alive, we had survived, and maybe, just maybe, we could finally begin again. The first light of dawn spilled over the city of Lyrian, painting the rooftops in soft gold. I had spent the night on the rooftop of a quiet inn, looking out at a city that had once been nothing but shadows to me. Now it felt alive. Arya joined me, her presence calm yet grounding. She handed me a cup of tea, steam curling in the cold morning air. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm just thinking," I replied, taking a slow sip. The warmth spread through me, chasing the chill from the night before. "You could leave," she said softly. "Go back to the mountains, live peacefully." I shook my head. Peace is relative. It's not about running away from the past. It's about living despite it. Her eyes softened. "And what about us?" I set my cup down and looked at her, not as a soldier, not as a recluse, but as a man who had finally remembered how to be human. "You're part of this," I said quietly. "Not because I need saving, but because I've realized life is better when shared." She smiled faintly, brushing a strand of wet hair behind her ear. I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone who healed, survived, and learned to care again, I said. She laughed softly. Extraordinary then. Human, I corrected. The city stirred below us, merchants setting up stalls, children running through the streets, a dog barking in the distance. It was ordinary, ordinary and beautiful. I realized that ordinary was what I had been running from, and what I had been running toward all along. Where will we go? Arya asked. I took her hand. It felt warm, grounding, real. We start here, together. And for the first time in 10 years, I let myself feel something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. Weeks passed. The Nightblades receded, and Raven's shadow faded into history. I returned to healing, but differently. I wasn't just treating wounds. I was teaching. I was guiding. And quietly, subtly, I was allowing someone into my life. Arya stayed by my side, not as a protector, not as a fugitive, but as a companion. We didn't speak of the past much. The future felt more important now. We found joy in the little things. A laugh over spilled tea. A shared sunset over the rooftops. A quiet walk through the city streets, hand in hand. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Arya leaned against me. Do you ever regret it? She asked. I shook my head. No, 10 years alone taught me patience, skill, restraint, but it also taught me gratitude. Gratitude for life, for every small moment, and for you. She looked up at me, eyes shimmering in the golden light. I'm glad you survived, she whispered. I smiled, resting my forehead against hers. Me too, I said. Life didn't become perfect. Shadows remained. Danger sometimes knocked at the door, but we faced it together, quietly, resolutely. The healer had become more than a survivor. He had become a man who could love, protect, and hope. And in the heart of the city, beneath the fading light, I finally understood. The truest power wasn't in the blade or the fight. It was in healing, in living, in allowing yourself to care. The mountains would always be there, the past would always whisper, but I was ready. For once I was home,